The following program contains the opinions of the host, guests, and call-in participants. These do not necessarily represent the views of this show's distributors or sponsors. This program may contain obscene, profane, or otherwise objectionable language. Viewer discretion is advised. Howdy-ho, everybody. Greetings from Minneapolis. Come to you cordless. It's Monday night, October 6th, 2025. I am Jim Peters in all his glory, and welcome to another edition of Jim Peters at Night. This is show number 279, and I have a caveat there, and I'll explain it in just a second. It's nice to be back here. We took the week off. Um, I'm starting not to like to do it. And the amazing thing is we're taking 2 days off next week too, and I'll explain that in a second. So as far as the caveat of why I said this is show number 279, the last show we did was on 2 Wednesdays ago, right? Hold on, let me check. What's the actual date? I don't even know. It was oh Jesus, I'm just wasting time now. It was September 24th is the last time we were on. So that our guest was Mandy Gunesekara, author and former Trump administration official from the first term, and Jonathan Lockwood, our military historian and analyst and former Army. They were the guests. That show, it basically, as far as we can tell, it did not go out. We did the show. And it didn't record. I mean, it recorded locally. It wasn't the whole weird thing that happened with Bruce Solheim a few months ago. It wasn't that. But it appears it did not transmit. So nobody watched it live anyway. And so because of that, we're going to run, well, not both of those interviews. We're going to run the one with Mandy Gunesekara, which we taped ahead of time. We taped separately. We're going to run that interview tonight again. And so because of that, that show was number 279. We're not going to count it. This is show number 279. So we're running Mandy's interview again. And also Jonathan Lockwood, we're not running his interview again. He came on live again this afternoon because what he's talking about is kind of time sensitive. The war in Ukraine and the war in Israel. So he came on live. So we're basically recreating the show from 10 days ago, kind of, sort of. But this is live. I'm here. It is Monday, October 6th, and I'm doing this on the spot. It's it's 8:03 p.m. Central Time right now. So yeah, we went on vacation. I get out of the groove of doing this, and I kind of don't like it. I'm starting to, now I'll tell you what we have coming up on shows the next couple of weeks here. But on Thursday, this coming Thursday night, October 9th, the 10th, the following day, Friday, which we normally don't do shows, is my 70th birthday. So we're doing a birthday show on Thursday the 9th, and our guest of record is Tim Conaway, our old friend, former editor of Hustler magazine. But we're inviting everybody. Most of the regulars of the show have all been invited to call in. The lines are going to be open all night long. We're inviting you to call in too. So that's on Thursday. So yeah, I'm going to be 70. Jesus Christ. And I'm looking at myself in the monitor today. I'm doing this interview with Lockwood, and I'm thinking, you look like shit. I mean, I hate to say it. It's terrible. It's awful. But it's like the beginning and the end, Now my mother's 101 and is still kicking, still taking names and kicking ass. So I have that going for me. But on the other hand, it's really true. I'm not trying to be funny here. I'm fat, and I wasn't fat for the first half of my life. I mean, I remember I hit 35. I was rail thin. I don't even want to tell you how little I weighed. I mean, actually, I was too thin, and I thought, I beat this shit. I thought, oh no, I didn't. It's the same thing like when I turned 60. I don't know if you follow this, but people say that doctors say that that's the big change people notice in their lives physically as far as their health is when they're 60. And I hit 60 and I thought, I beat this whole thing again. It's like I feel fine, I'm great. Well, 61 a year later, all the crap hit the fan. And then I ended up having heart surgery and all sorts of stuff. Unbelievable. I honestly went, okay, so I had heart surgery. uh I gotta figure this out. Uh in oh god, January of 23, no, 21. In January of 21. So yeah, um I was 66. I had heart surgery. And that was the first time in my life I'd ever been in a hospital. I mean, which is really amazing when you stop and think about it. I mean, I went 66 years, other than birth, of course, with never being checked into a hospital. My health has been, knock on wood, has been relatively fantastic, even considering the fact that I had heart surgery. So that's good, I guess. But and the mind is kind of sort of still working, I guess. I don't know. I got to admit, I really like doing this. I'm gonna talk about this too. I had this on the rundown after. I'm gonna tell you who we have coming up in the next couple weeks here. But we're making some changes, not even changes, additions to the show, which I will announce in total on Thursday on our birthday show. But basically, we've decided now we've started posting shorts on both TikTok and YouTube, and where they're automatically generated and automatically posted. And so now we're posting pretty much two a day from interviews, and they're strictly from interviews. Not, I mean, nobody wants to hear me blab. I know that. The interview people are good. That's what I'm good at. So that's what we're gonna do. But we're and now I've decided over the weekend, after thinking about this and studying this a little bit, I've decided we're going to start posting the whole interviews too. The interviews separate from the live show, so you can always see this at 9 p.m. Eastern, Monday through Thursday. We're still going to continue to do this, but and especially it's convenient because we now record almost all of these interviews ahead of time. And the primary reason we do that is technical. I don't know what's happened here in the 2.5 years that we've been doing this show. People are having a harder and a harder time connecting and getting a good picture and good sound. I don't know if the internet's becoming more complex. I don't think we're asking people to do more. Other than the regulars who come on this program, we have about a half a dozen people come on roughly once a month. A few of them maybe once every 6 or 8 weeks. They know the drill. Excuse me. So uh we're doing those live still, but other than that, we now require our guests to come on. We do them in the afternoon, and because of that, they're all always taped separately, and it's really easy just to upload the interviews. So we're going to do that. So you don't necessarily have to watch the whole show. I came to the conclusion, as a lot of people have, and maybe I'm slow, that I really don't care how you digest what we're doing here. I don't care if you watch the whole thing. I don't care if you watch the interviews. I don't care if you watch the shorts. I have to admit, I'm amazed that we post these shorts on TikTok, and literally within a few minutes, a couple other people watch them. It just astonishes me. It does. Now, I've been talking about this for a while too, and this is not going to happen till later this month. I don't know when the first one's going to be, but we're going to end up doing. We're going to do a special show on TikTok once, maybe even twice a week. I don't know. We're going to see. Right now, I'm thinking Fridays, and we might also do Sundays too. And we might miss a few or whatever. I mean, like, no one's paying me to do this, so uh, anyway, that's yeah, and that's going to be they'll be TikTok specific. Well, on TikTok, you're um, uh, left to an hour, only an hour of live broadcasting, and also, of course, it's really easy to quote unquote call in because basically, not only I mean TikTok, all the major services have chats, and the reason we haven't indulged in chats previously is because we're on 6 different services, and um, you can't. There's no real way to blend the chats together, and so I decided, well, screw it. And besides, it's like I personally am not into this, but I know that all you people kind of are. So, it's like, but the thing is, on TikTok, I will be able to interact with the chat directly because it's the only place we're going to be doing it. We're not broadcast. Those shows are going to be TikTok specific. I've been going on and on about TikTok. I mean, when I was at Calling News, and this is like going back to 2021, Jeff Meyer, the CEO, says, "Jim, get on TikTok and see if we want to do anything on there." And I did, and I was appalled. I thought, "Oh my God, there's so much crap here. It's unbelievable." And there is. And then I started to realize what the brilliance and why this thing became so popular. Well, first of all, it's the only real service where here's the if those of you who I mean everyone's on social media, but if you're a creator and you're indulging and trying to you're pushing a product or trying to push your own creations or whatever, the one thing you'll notice is that the thing about things going viral up till now has largely been a myth, because basically, if you wanted to get any traction on any of these services, and Facebook is notorious for this, you basically have to pay them. It's either promotion, advertising, something, boosting, quote unquote. You have to boost your post, whatever it is. If you want any sort of traction, you have to do that. And of course, they're in the business to make money, and that's fine. But the thing about oh, we posted something and all of a sudden 2 million people saw it. Well, yeah, that happens occasionally, but here's the deal: hardly ever. So that was largely a myth. I mean, there's a whole bunch of myths involved in both social media and just publishing on the internet in general that people don't know about. And because of experience, I've learned a lot of them. The thing with TikTok and the thing that became so popular is the first service where, let me back up here for a second. The other thing is, on most of these services, you have to be popular to get popular. In other words, you're either already famous outside of the medium, or else you have paid to promote your post, and therefore then it starts to take on a life of its own. In other words, you literally do. Facebook uses the term "boost it," but that's actually what happens. You boost your post, and then it takes off. But TikTok is the only single one of these services that tweak their algorithm so that you don't actually have to do that. Things actually do go viral on TikTok for real, and it's the first one, and I think that's one of the reasons it's wildly popular. And yeah, we put up the shorts. Now we're posting 2 a day, basically, from interviews, and within 5 minutes, 200 people see them. I just find this amazing. It's just astonishing. Anyway, yeah, I'm on my high horse. There we go. That's the horse. That's the horse. The horse that's high. That's what that is. Okay, so what do we got going on here? I thought we got it going on. You know that. Okay, Boomer, we do. Tonight, Mandy Gunesekara and Jonathan Lockwood. Tomorrow night, Niels Gravelius. He's this will be his second appearance on this program. He was on a few months ago. He's the Los Angeles private detective. Fascinating guy, just fascinating. I love this guy. I love talking to him. I asked him to come back, and he said yes. And Kimberly arranged for it. God bless Kimberly for booking this whole mess. So he's coming back. We're going to talk to him. He says he wants to talk about crime, so we'll talk about crime. Okay. Wednesday, Jennifer Oliver O'Connell, one of our longtime regulars. She's a writer at Red State. She's coming on, and we're specifically going to talk about she's written a series of articles on this guy in the Des Moines school district who was the superintendent there, who turned out to be a complete and total fraud. Complete. I mean, guy hasn't. I don't know. Hasn't gone. I guess he did go to college or something, but he's been lying through his teeth for like 30 years, and he finally got caught. And she's done a whole series of articles on him, and they're brilliant and fascinating, the articles. And we're going to talk about that. And of course, you know the usual stuff that we talk about. She's been coming on about once every couple months, basically, or 6 weeks. So she's kind of a regular here too. Thursday, we have our birthday show. Like I said, Tim Conaway, former executive editor of Hustler magazine, he is the guest of record. But the phone lines are going to be open all night long, and we're just going to gab with you folks. Nothing on the agenda here. It's my birthday. I'm getting old. So, like I said, it's the beginning of the end. So, it's like I might have 2 weeks, I might have 40 years. Who knows? We're winging it. Next Monday and Tuesday, the 13th and 14th, I'm taking off because this week on Friday, which is my actual birthday, I'm going to visit some friends in eastern Wisconsin. the missus and I are taking off, drive through the forest. It's beautiful. The leaves are changing color here, and my friends live on the Peshtigo River in eastern Wisconsin. It's about 30 miles from the UP border, and so we're gonna go see them, and we're gonna be gone for a very long weekend. So yeah, so I'm taking Monday and Tuesday off. Wednesday, Larry Newman, our old friend, is here. He missed his regular. Larry comes on once a month. He missed his regular um, slot last month because he had dental surgery and couldn't talk. Now, apparently, this has been. He said as of today, he's still having problems talking, but he thinks he's gonna be fine by next Wednesday. So that's fine. And on Thursday, we have William Jasper joining us. He's the president of the John Birch Society. Now, we've had Wayne Morrow on. He's the CEO of the John Birch Society. William Jasper, Bill Jasper, is the president, and he's also the senior editor of the New American Magazine. So that'll be interesting. We have the rest of the month is booking out, and but you don't even want to hear about it at this point. So okay, so let's hear from Mandy Gunesekara. And I want to preface this too. So we did take this ahead of time. Like I said, we ran this 2 Wednesdays ago, but I don't know if anybody saw it, so we're just going to do it again. This woman is brilliant. I was really impressed by this woman's ability to talk, and also I read her book. It's called "Y'all Fired." It's about the deep state in Washington D.C., and it could not explain that concept better. It's not a very long book. I highly recommend that you look this up on Amazon and buy it. I really do. It's like I read the whole thing. I was really impressed. So it's a pleasure for me to run this again. Here's Mandy Gunesekara in 12 seconds. Joining us from her home in Oxford, Mississippi, author and former chief of staff for the U.S. EPA under the first Trump administration, Mandy Gunesekara, and I pronounced your name right. How about that?
Yeah, that's A+.
Hey, really quick, is that your married name, or is that for your family, or?
That's my married name. My husband's family is Sri Lankan. It's a Sri Lankan last name. That's where it comes from.
I'm sorry. Say again. What was that?
It's Sri Lankan. It's from Sri Lanka.
Uh-huh.
And that's my husband's family name. That's where it comes from.
Oh, okay. All right, cool. So look, here's the deal, Mandy. I read a lot of books to do this show, and a lot of press releases. I read a lot. As I told you before we went on the air here, I got a copy of her book this morning. I've only read about half of it. I have to say it's really compelling. You have a real gift for explaining complex subjects in relatively digestible terms, and I applaud you for that. This is like your book is like the second. I think I start a book club. Your book's like the second book I've read in like the last 8-9 months. The other one was a book by a guy named Brian Trilly called Soulless Intelligence, about the nature of artificial intelligence. But yeah, it's like God, good for you. I mean, this is really incredible what you're doing here, because I don't know if a lot of people even believe that the deep state exists.
Yeah, and that was part of why I wrote the book. I just wanted to paint a picture of what is the deep state to someone I feel like they can relate to, an everyday American person like me who went to DC, was drawn to DC for a lot of the same reasons that people are initially drawn there. Ended up working in the House and the Senate, going into the administration, and just being totally blown away in the worst kind of way with how the deep state will treat people that they disagree with, not just stopping their policy actions, but trying to take it a step further and demean, demoralize, and discredit the people and the policies that they disagree with.
And like you say in the book, in the executive branch anyway, none of these people have been elected. They're
Right.
supposed to serve at the pleasure of the president. They don't. How did you end up here? That is in DC. How did you get there?
So I did internships in undergrad. I did a summer internship for my local congressman and I loved it. I was a communications major undergrad, thought I wanted to go be a reporter, went to Capitol Hill and spent a summer really just giving tours and greeting people who walked into the door and trying to make them feel comfortable and excited about DC. And I really fell in love with the hustle and bustle that of all that was going on in Capitol Hill. And so after undergrad and then law school, I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do, but I knew where I wanted to be, which was working on Capitol Hill in DC.
You talk about in the book something you call the New Deal Constitution. What is that?
Yeah, it's essentially the imposter constitution is another way to think about it. But the what has slowly but surely replaced our founders' constitution, the original document that set up a constitutional republic where the power really lies at the states, where you have an important and functional centralized government, but that's not where people look to for guidance on just about everything since the New Deal. And I think there's a lot of things, a lot of actions that led up to the New Deal. But really, I call it the New Deal Constitution because it was that time when you had all these resources coming in and people started putting their resources and reliance on the federal government to solve all sorts of societal issues, not just providing congressionally mandated services as was initially the vision, if you will, of the administrative state. And then the proliferation of the administrative state that erodes the relevance of individuals and voters, our rights and our responsibilities. The New Deal allowed for the proliferation of the administrative state, and it slowly but surely replaced our original Constitution. And that's it in a nutshell.
Do you think when Roosevelt was elected in 32 and we were deep in the Depression, that the Democrats realized they had to take advantage of a crisis here? Did they just kind of fall ass right backwards into this and realize, oh my God, we got something here? Do you have any idea?
It's hard to say. I imagine like today, it was probably a combination of two types of people. Some who really went in to solve the issue, and then others who felt that they were better suited to handle the power of our country in their hands and in the hands of a few of their selected and appointed colleagues in Washington D.C. So I really think it was a combination, but that is where it took off, where people started looking to the federal government and there were folks sitting in positions of consequence and power that were willing to take that and run with it and not just try to solve the problem, but to create some type of professional relevance and some personal benefit from it.
So I'm assuming you might agree with my assessment here. I mean, FDR is looked at as a great president, and yet I am starting to think more and more as I talk to more historians and especially more economists that he was kind of a failure. I mean, so I have an economist who comes on the show regularly, and we were talking about the fact that when the Depression started in '29, the Hoover was booted out of office because there was the impression he wasn't doing anything about it. So FDR comes in, and then there's the impression he's doing something. He attempts to do some stuff, a lot of stuff. There's a lot of motion, but in actuality, all the stuff he did, or the majority of it, actually prolonged the Depression. And I said to my economist friend here, I'm talking to him, I say, is that because they didn't know enough about capitalism 100 years ago and know what was going to? No. They knew. It's just he was an ideologue and he just wanted to do what he wanted to do. And the Depression should have been over in 2 years, and it took 8. I
Yeah.
know. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I would agree with that assessment, and I had the benefit of some really great teachers in my undergraduate experience, and one of them basically said, a lot of people talk about the FDR administration is getting us out of the Great Depression, but what actually got us out was World War II. And it was, the need to restart and make things that a capitalist economy, only a capitalist economy like the United States could actually respond to in the way that we did. And that obviously went to the overall war success. But nonetheless, yeah, I would too be critical of FDR. I think he gets a free pass in a lot of ways, and he gets the affiliation with getting the country out of the Great Depression. But a lot of his policies and ideals, they not only prolonged the Great Depression and how it was felt across the country, but it also was this massive gateway for these really bad progressive ideas that we're still dealing with the consequences of today.
Yeah. All right. So back to your own story. So you interned in Washington D.C. and then how did you actually get there permanently? What job was it, or who hired you, or?
Well, what initially got me there, I graduated law school 2010, which was a horrible year to be a new attorney. Even the best in our class, which I wasn't, but the best in our class, they had firm jobs that were delayed for a year or two because the markets were so bad. So I went to Washington D.C. with my husband, and I my first job back was at Lululemon. I was working at Lululemon, and I was interning again for free on Capitol Hill just to get my foot back in the door. And once I interned for a Colorado member of Congress, and there was an opportunity in the Senate to be a staff assistant. So I applied for that. I got it and went from there. But my first job was as a staff assistant for then ranking member Mike Enzi. He represented the state of Wyoming, and he was the ranking member of the Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions Committee. And I was working on labor issues.
That's really interesting because I talked to people from Wyoming. I've never been there. It's a
Mhm.
very interesting place. First of all, it's one of the only 4 states that has less representatives than senators. There's that. So, and also, I mean, the people there are highly independent. I mean, there's only 250,000 people in the whole state. I mean, how did that affect what you were doing? I mean, it's like if you were, you weren't from there, I assume, right?
No, the name for me on Capitol Hill is I was a Hill orphan. I never actually got to work for my home state senator or member of Congress past my initial internship. But yeah, it was interesting working for a representative from Wyoming. Now, I worked for him in his role as a ranking member of the committee. And so members will explain this. They often have to look at it from a sense of federal policy. And then they have their constituent offices or their personal offices where they represent the interests of Wyoming. But nonetheless, the two are often integrated and for good reason. And there's just there's a strong independence. There is that original free spirit of Americana that is represented by the state itself and then the many people that came through the door. And then it's very much tied to the resources of the state. The economy itself is tied to the resources, and development and proliferation of those resources are a huge part of how that state operates. So that impacted just about everything we did, all the way down to working on specific labor and pension related issues.
So I didn't get a chance to read this in your book because like I said, I just got it this morning. But you right away you referenced what you called the bond story. What is that? You talk about
The
it a lot. What happened? I didn't read the story. I didn't actually read it. It's right in the front of the book, and I didn't actually read it. So what is that? Apparently, it changed your mind about a lot of things, huh?
It really did. It was kind of the wool was pulled away from my eyes, and I saw the world as it really was, versus through rose-colored glasses, as was kind of raised to, and how I did initially
Oh,
see
but Mandy,
DC.
come on. The problem with the American public is most of us have rose-colored glasses on. The longer I do this, the more I realize how much of a shit show this whole thing is. I mean, it's terrible,
It's it's
Anyway,
true.
yeah.
It's true. Well, my realization story. It's quite unfortunate. I worked for the president in getting out of the Paris Climate Accord. I'd worked on those issues in the Senate. I had been the Republican staffer going to these international meetings called the Conferences of the Parties, which led up to the Obama administration signing us onto the Paris Climate Accord. I knew it was a bad deal. I knew the authority President Obama was using was inappropriate, borderline illegal, and nonetheless, no, that fell on deaf ears. When President Trump came in, he had made a commitment to get out of the Paris Climate Accord. So I was a part of his small team, mind you, that was trying to help him take that final step and actually get the country out. It was a big fight for many months. In the process,
Hold on, I got
there
a
were
topic for you. I got a question. Did Obama do it simply because of the optics of it? I mean, it looked great.
Yeah, I mean, it was driven by optics, but also their allegiance to this left-wing policy, which became the Green New Deal, or the Green New Scam, as President Trump appropriately calls it. But they really were all in on using the administrative state to push regulations because they couldn't get these policies passed through Congress because the people don't support their climate efforts that make life more expensive, more difficult, and subject to more federal control. So they were using the administrative state, and they wanted the Paris Climate Accord to be a reason why they would continue to push to use the administrative state and shore up a lot of otherwise legally dubious actions at EPA, at the Department of Interior, Department of Energy, you name it.
All right. I got another question on this too. I have one of my two great goals in this show is to convince the American public that climate change, or human caused climate change anyway, is a complete hoax. It's bullshit. But my question is, I have a lot of guests on to talk about this. Do you think that they knew that? Like, did Obama personally or his administration, do they know it's bunk, or they actually believe the erroneous science that says that this is real? Do you have any thought on that at all?
I think, like I said, I think it's a combination. I think former President Obama himself knows it's bunk. Otherwise, he wouldn't have bought a house literally on the shores if he was so worried about sea level rise. I mean, that's Exhibit A.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah,
Um,
okay. I'm sorry. I interrupted your story, so go ahead. So you were okay.
So I was working on the Paris Climate Accord. A lot of people at the State Department were very upset by this. And, after your listeners may not know this, but once the president announced we were getting out, which was that summer, he tasked a small group of us to go to the meeting later that year in Bonn, Germany, and to renegotiate a better deal. He wanted us to create an opportunity for technology share and, to share what we do quite well in this country, which is have great industrial success alongside environmental protection.
So hold on. Was the goal then, if he could get what he wanted, would they have stayed in it?
The goal ultimately was to form a different deal. He was never going to get back in the Paris Climate Accord as it was written, but to use that platform to generate agreements, or maybe formal or informal. We never quite got to that point, but to generate a benefit for the United States using this platform that, unfortunately, the reality was we were already significantly invested in. So that was the general idea.
Okay.
But anyway, so when I go to Bonn, when you travel as a federal employee, there's people that handle all of your logistics, how you get there, where you stay, and whatnot. And there's rules around it. Me, having been a federal employee traveling abroad before, didn't think twice about cross-checking where I was staying in particular. I go to Bonn, I show up, all my logistics had been handled by the State Department, in particular the consulate in Frankfurt, Germany, and come to find out the hotel that they put me and one other female colleague, with there were 120 American delegates out there, two of us ended up in this hotel that, come to find out, it was a sex hotel that they put us up in. And so it was just this picture of, they don't want to just stop us. They want to try to humiliate us or discredit us in any way possible. And, the whole thing of it, no one was ever held to account for the fact that in any other professional setting, someone would have lost their job for putting a professional in a sex hotel 45 minutes away from where the negotiations were, much less someone doing the business of the president of the United States. And when I came back, I put together all the information. My chief of staff at the time and I went over to the State Department and briefed the Tillerson people, and nothing ever happened. And so there were two lessons. One is these people they're not just trying to stop us. They want to take it a step further than that. And the other piece of it is, the hard lesson that we had people on the Trump team that weren't on board with the president's mission, and the Secretary Tillerson and those folks there, they unfortunately weren't committed to trying to find ways to hold the bureaucracy to account. And there's a lot of reasons. I may be being extremely critical, but nonetheless, he left not too long after that, and nothing ever came of it.
Well, first of all, I have to ask you, were you and the other woman at the hotel, were you the only women in the whole delegation?
We weren't the only women, but we were the only ones that were we were the only political appointee women,
Uh,
a
uh,
part of, so because it was a mixture of careers and political appointees that
right.
ended up at this hotel.
Right. And then the other thing is, and basically your book is about this, about the fact that, um, excuse me, I gotta gather my thoughts here. Uh, the, 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 the bureaucratic state is basically run rampant at this point. Oh no, what I was actually going to ask you is about the fact that it seems that you have 120 people in that delegation. There's so many people working in the federal government now that it seems like it's almost impossible to vet every single person, make certain that everyone's on the president's agenda, isn't it? I mean,
Yeah, absolutely. And especially when you start integrating in the career people as well. And, I think this was a naivete that I certainly had. And I think it was one of the things that held back the initial administration, thinking you could eventually win people over, even if they disagreed with you. You could convince them of their role as a public servant, that they were doing the right thing, which is following the direction of the duly elected president of the United States, all of those thoughts. And at the end of the day, it turned out, no, you're not dealing with rational people. You are dealing with activists and ideologues that want to, they will try to thwart the president's agenda and the people pushing it forward using any means necessary.
okay, so I'm kind of going to go off on a tangent here because you said the magic word, and that's rational. Uh, I, that's the problem, is that people, we expect everyone, most people, rational people, expect everyone else to act rationally. And not only do we have people aren't acting rationally, I talk to more and more people all the time. I'm actually starting to think this isn't a political problem. We're dealing with people that are actually, for some reason, mentally ill. I mean, do you have any thoughts on that at all?
Yeah, I mean, probably. Look at our culture and society more broadly. The people who work in the federal government are a subset of that. So certainly, there are people who there's some portion of their brain that is so committed to an ideological goal or affiliation, or in a lot of instances, it's become their religion.
Yeah,
They don't know the Bible or Jesus, and so they
right.
replace it with the government, and they replace it with programs within the government, and that becomes their life's mission and their life's work,
Yeah,
and they're so committed.
that's actually what I'm starting to think, that I'm starting to think it's a spiritual quest. If you don't have real spirituality in your life, you start to look for other stuff. I know I can't understand what's going on here. I mean, I don't know if you saw the survey came out last month about the fact that 1/3 of the American public said they're described themselves as mentally dysfunctional. 1/3 of American adults. That's crazy, Mandy. It's like, that's nuts.
Yeah, yeah, and I think there's a lot of reasons. One, I think, is what I was just alluding to, is people not having moral clarity because they don't have a firm foundation rooted in Christ. Number one, and number two, I think it's this proliferation of social media that just creates this constant anxiety buzz. And so, humans aren't physically equipped to deal with that constantly. And I think that's why we're dealing with massive numbers of people who are either depressed or anxious or have some mental problem that they struggle with every day.
I totally agree with you. I think you're right. I think humans, this whole social media thing came onto us, and we're not literally not equipped at the present time to deal with it. And it's just been overwhelming us. I don't have to tell you this because you probably guessed. I mean, if I had a list of people I want to interview, President Trump would be at the very top. But this is the thing I want to ask him, and so as a surrogate, I'm going to ask you. I'm under the impression, like you kind of alluded, that he knew about the deep state, but he had no idea how deep it was. Is that what the kind of the is? Am I right about that? I mean, did you draw any conclusions, or even yourself? I mean, that's basically what you're alluding to yourself, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And he's talked about this publicly. I think his eyes were unfortunately open with his initial meeting with the FBI director that came in and was setting a trap. And it really was that first instance. I think I've heard him talk about this on a couple of different platforms, but he invited him in because he thought that he could convince him to be a part of the team. And at the end of it and throughout, it was very clear that was not the case, which was totally different approach to trying to get things done from his perspective in dealings with being a businessman in New York City. And where he's used to dealing with all sorts of personalities, all sorts of complicating issues and factors, but nonetheless, people in the federal government, they are a different breed of folks, that these ideologues and activists that are so protective. They will look at you, they will be nice to you, they will open the door for you, they'll bring you water, they'll do all these things to feign some positive relationship, and you think it's real, you think it's an opportunity to engage them, but it really is just an effort for them to thwart whatever it is you're doing. And they will do it either professionally, from a policy perspective, or they'll go after you personally, either with harassment type setups like I experienced, or starting false investigations. President Trump had to deal with that, but even people like me, I had inspector general investigations opened up to myself and a lot of our political appointees, premised on absolute nonsense. But nonetheless, if you have to face something like that, you have to spend tens of thousands of dollars in legal protection, because you have to take it seriously. And so all of that together, you have to almost experience it or to see it in very clear ways, like the American public saw over the 4 years of the Biden administration, to be able to accept it as true.
Yeah, but the real scary thing is, Mandy, forgive me, but until your book came out, I never heard of you. And if that's happening to you, that means it must be happening to zillions of other people too.
Oh yeah, I mean, it's some of the worst, frankly, are, I call them our young
Oh,
guns, but
hold it.
these.
Before you go on, could you actually explain to the viewers what actually happened to you? I read it in your book, but could you
Oh,
explain it?
yeah, so I had inspector general investigation. It was initiated, and I was actually gone, but it was just over a year ago. Two FBI agents and a representative of EPA's IG office showed up to my office in Oxford, Mississippi, to serve me a criminal subpoena to come testify in Washington D.C. in less than a month. And all of this, it was premised on nothing but to fight back, or to push back, and to deal with that. Once it's been initiated, I had to hire lawyers, go through the back and forth, and ultimately, nothing came of it. Nothing came of it except for a big legal expense on my end. But this was 1 week
And
after my name had been floated as a potential for running a future Trump EPA. And so, what the left will do is they will try to just open up investigations on people. So, if you are ever nominated and have to go through a confirmation process, they can say, well, she's under investigation by the FBI, whether something actually came from it or not. And so that was one way that everyone saw President Trump dealing with that 10 times worse. But it was happening to me. It was happening to folks. I called them our young guns. These are young kids just out of college that get their first job working in the administration, and they're dealing with the exact same thing: anonymously sourced, bogus inspector general accusations or investigations coming from the Department of Justice, and you have to lawyer up.
without getting too specific, can you give us a rough idea how much this cost you in dollars?
Oh yeah, $40,000 plus.
Just wasted. Just
Totally wasted. Totally wasted for a frivolous political hit job.
yeah. So you spend some time in your book talking about how um, Republicans are actually, I should be more precise, how liberals and conservatives deal with this differently. And you mentioned this about the fact that one of the problems with conservatives, and therefore Republicans by extension, is that we aren't unified. We have more of a difference of opinion than
Yeah.
than liberals do, and actually it hurts us. Do you want to elaborate on that?
Yeah, it's one of these instances. It's a blessing and a curse. It's a blessing in the sense that there is a lot of debate, true form debate within our movement. But when it comes to coming together, even over issues that we may disagree on, it slows down the process because we have to deal with debates within our own coalition. And that was one of the most surprising things to me, and this was front and center during the Paris Climate Accord debates, is you had a faction of people within the White House that wanted to stay into that agreement. There was a smaller faction of us, and then the president himself who had committed to getting out of it. And you spend, or at least I spent more energy debating amongst ourselves to finally get to agreement and take that step of finality, with the president making a final decision. You spend more energy fighting amongst yourselves than you do against people that you're walking into a room and they're going to be on the opposite side of any policy
So,
situation.
Mandy, do you think in this particular case that it's because some people actually buy the science bunk that's been thrown around? I mean, one of the reasons I'm interested in this because I'm really interested in science, and there is no scientific basis for this at all. It's been completely made up, and yet it's so prevalent. Do you think that people in the Republican Party just kind of assume it's true, or
Yeah, well, I don't think they're courageous enough to challenge the science. And I had the benefit of working for Senator Jim Inhofe. He was the first person who, at least at the Senate and publicly, called it the greatest hoax ever perpetuated on the American
it
people.
is? I
and
agree.
and it and it is. But you have a lot of Republicans in particular that they weren't courageous enough to speak the actual truth or ask probing questions. And it's partly because the left made it so difficult to ask questions. I mean, you look at what they've done. You see this in other areas. COVID, for example, is what most people are familiar with. But at the climate debate, anyone who didn't accept whatever the left was saying about climate, and accept the extreme distorted versions of science, they called you a skeptic. They called you a denier. They tried to paint you as stupid. And there's a lot of people in the Republican Party that they don't want to face that. They don't want to get into those debates because the left made it so difficult. And nonetheless, I think it's a combination of people not having courage, people not taking just a little bit of time to look at it from an honest perspective. And then there's others that they get tied into what I call the business of DC, and the deep state is a derivative of this, but they benefit from going along with the status quo. It's easier to get people to co-sponsor your bill if you're not a climate denier. It's easier to get invited to the posh parties if you're not a climate denier. There's all sorts of reasons people become invested and care about the business of Washington D.C., and that's a piece of it as well.
What I've noticed, and a lot of people come on the show have noticed too, is that as people get elected to Congress, and if they're there and around maybe around 10 years in or so, their fifth or sixth term, all of a sudden they start to come into big money. And is that simply a matter of the fact that those after you've been there for a while, the establishment decided, well, you're behaving, so we're going to reward you? Is that what's going on?
It's not always in cut and dry for Republicans. It certainly is for the left. There's a lot of that, and you saw a lot of that with the Department of Government Efficiencies exposing USAID and how a lot of those funds that were set aside to go to these crazy projects abroad were actually going to nonprofits that were run by the spouses or the family members or the close friends of people who were making decisions of how much money to send and where it actually went. And so that is more prevalent. It's not exclusive, but it's more prevalent on the left. There's some Republicans that do have that direct benefit, but yeah, I think it's even more broad. It's broader than just monetary benefit. There's a social benefit as well, as if you make it easy for Washington D.C. to do their business versus representing the interests of your state, your constituency, or even injecting truth into very entrenched, heated debates.
So this is maybe a metaphysical question. Why do people lack the guts to do that sort of stuff, to defy that sort of stuff?
That's a good question. And I think maybe some don't realize what they're going to be facing. A lot of them, it's a money issue. You have to raise a lot of money to run for these various offices. They get to DC and they start getting $10,000 checks from this constituency and 10,000 here. And the people writing those checks and giving it to members know it, and they don't want to upset them and turn off that monetary spigot. And so I think it's a combination of the financial influence and then also people not having very firm principles of where they're from and where their starting point is on any issue. And that's, where you lack clarity, you can invite in other influences to stop you from being effective.
So the people that are in the bureaucracy of Washington, I wonder sometimes, is their attitude, or is their attitude about the fact that we do really boring jobs and therefore we deserve never to get fired? I mean, you spent part of your book talking about how it's almost impossible to fire federal employees. And I mean, and I knew that, but even reading what you wrote, it's just mind-boggling. It's unbelievable, and you were earlier, you talking about the fact that there's something, I can't remember what you were discussing about how there's something you would never get away with this in the private sector in a million years, and yet people keep the jobs and nothing happens. Is there some sort of strange rationalization in the mind of these people that, well, we're doing boring work and therefore we deserve never to get fired, or something like that?
Yeah, I just think they're entitled. They feel very entitled to their position. And, one of the examples I talk about in the book is at EPA, there was a person who pretended like he was in the CIA, which wasn't true. And he used that as a reason to not show up for work for a really, really long time. And he got away with it. Now, ultimately, he was held to account. That's one of the few people, but it's such an extreme case. There were other instances where federal employees would watch porn all day and it was almost impossible for their higher ups to fire them and let them go. And so it's a combination of they either they feel very entitled to these jobs. The public sector unions are a huge problem because they create these ecosystems, these employment ecosystems where people are untouchable. And if you take away accountability, then that breeds laziness, that breeds all sorts of unprofessional actions and obstinance towards them actually doing the job. And this is especially critical to people filling roles that the public rightfully views as public service. That's what they sign up for. That's what the public is told that these people are doing. But at the end of the day, you have these ridiculous protections that take away accountability, and that creates all of these perverse outcomes. I will say a lot of that's changed in the Trump administration. I talked to my friends this go round. I talked to my friends that are currently serving in political appointee roles, and they say that dealing with the career civil service, it's much easier now because they have tools that if someone doesn't do what they're told to do, respective of their particular position, they can actually be fired now, and they realize that.
You wrote in your book about this thing called Schedule F, and I don't quite really understand. How does this work?
So it would be a new classification of employment within the federal government, and basically any role that has a policy making aspect to it could be deemed Schedule F. This would be a different category, and at the end of the day, it would be easier to let them go if they aren't doing their job. It was an effort. The simple way to think about it was to inject accountability. What I was just talking about that was lacking so much accountability, that if you aren't following through and doing the job like you're required to if you work in the private sector and you're subject to at-will employment, it was a dose of the at-will reality being injected into the federal government to breed accountability and to let leadership either reassign someone or fire them altogether if they weren't doing their job.
And Trump enacted this by executive order, you said, correct?
He did.
Yeah, it's still in effect?
Well, he tried it at the end of the last administration. It actually didn't go into effect, but created a big stir. It was one of his first executive orders of this administration that he has instituted, and there's legal fights around it. But nonetheless, I think as we've seen in a lot of these court battles, it will turn out favorably for him. And just to back up and broaden the picture a little bit, one of the reasons President Trump in this administration 47 has been so effective and ready to go is not no one, but a lot of us didn't stop working from the last administration, and we came together in various groups. I worked on Project 2025, but there were other conservative projects out there trying to think through the issues we wanted and we saw as absolutely necessary for the next conservative president to implement on day one, and thinking through how you would do it, why it was important from a policy perspective, and then how you would defend it legally. And that work continued for 4 years leading up to President Trump's first day in
I was
office.
just about to ask you that. In some ways, as far as the Democrats are concerned, Trump taking a 4-year break was the worst thing that could happen to him. He had 4 years to think about what he was going to do next.
Yeah,
If he had just continued, it probably would not have gone as well. It's
yeah.
really amazing. Yeah.
I agree. It is, he had 4 years to plan, to strategize, and to get additional clarity on how the deep state treated people that they thought that they had pushed out of Washington, D.C. forever.
So are you kind of optimistic about the way things are going here? I mean, I have to say, it seems like such an uphill slog. But what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I am very optimistic. I'm naturally optimistic about things, but I try to level set, especially when it comes to instituting sustainable federal policy, which is what President Trump is laying the groundwork for. It's going to be really important for, ideally, for there to be generations of conservatives that keep these efforts going. A good comparison is the Supreme Court. That used to be a bastion of activism and the progressive movement for a long time, and it was methodical decades of work of trying to get originalists, not necessarily conservative, originalist justices back into those positions. And we ultimately did, but it took massive commitment, long term commitment, massive resources, and sustained education. We can replicate that in taking on the administrative state, but we've got to continue that beyond the 4 years of 47. And the good news on that front is we have such a deep bench of leadership that I think is not only immensely electable, but also very knowledgeable on these very issues and how to sustain these policies in the long term.
Mandy, I predicted that I think the Republicans are going to have a 40-year run like the Democrats had from 1940 to 1980. I think that's what's going to happen here. Because finally, well, first of all, it's Trump's personality, but we finally being able to illuminate to the general public exactly what we stand for, which for a long time, I don't know if people could do that or whatever. But I'm going to put your book on the screen here. You got a nice cover. It's pretty cool. I have one more question. This is not rhetorical. You're an extremely attractive woman, and yet you're very, very gifted. Do you have any trouble with convincing people of that sometimes?
I think I'm underestimated a lot.
Yeah.
I'm very small. I'm like 5 feet tall and pretty
Uh-huh.
petite, and so I think folks underestimate me a lot. But that's kind of been my whole life, and I don't mind it.
Yeah, well, you're probably used to it at this point. But I can't recommend this book enough. I mean, it's like I'm only halfway through it, and I'm skipping around, but it's very, very well written. And you make the case for why this is a problem better than pretty much anything I've read so far. So, God, kudos to you. Really, it's like quite an accomplishment. It's pretty
Well,
cool.
thank you very
Yeah.
much.
I hope you come back sometime. Okay.
Yeah, anytime. It was great to be with you.
Yeah. Thank you. That's Mandy Gunesekara. And as I said, and there I was not pulling her chain. That the book is brilliant. It's called Y'all Fired. And look it up on Amazon. And I'd say we are so behind on putting links on our blog. I I, I'm embarrassed. I don't know what to tell you. It's like there's too much to do and not enough time. So we're gonna do a little Jimcast here before we put Jonathan Lockwood on. A few things happened. I was gonna say a few things happened during the week while we were gone, but most of this stuff is from the last 24 hours. And the big news, and you know I'm obsessed with the media because I'm in the media. Uh, the big news in the media this morning was that, and this was long rumored, but it actually was approved. It was official today. Paramount, that owns CBS News, excuse me, hold on a second. I should have done this while the interview was running. Paramount, that owns CBS News, which is now owned by Skydance, David Ellison, Larry Ellison's son, bought Barry Weiss's The Free Press for $150 million and made her editor in chief of CBS News. Now, in actuality, in the terms of the media landscape, the latter is probably more important than the former. But the nice thing about Barry basically completely wins. She is the majority owner of the Free Press, and so I'm sure at least half that money is going to go to her. So she becomes rich, and she wins because she was pushed out of the New York Times for I can't remember what it was, for some silly little thing. She was canceled by the rest of the staff. Basically, she was bullied out of there, so she left. She was not the editor in chief of the New York Times. I think she was the head of the editorial page. I think I'm pulling that on my butt. Excuse me if I'm wrong. But yeah, so she was pushed out of there. She started a newsletter on Substack, because a lot of people do, and it grew into the Free Press, where she was hiring people and charging subscriptions. And apparently, they do really well on subscriptions. They have millions of people that have signed up to pay for this. So, it's going to continue to run. CBS Paramount has announced that they are going to, although they bought the Free Press, they're going to run it as a completely separate entity. It's going to continue on its way, and Barry's going to work for both CBS News and the Free Press. And so, and the big deal here, of course, is that the reason David Ellison says he hired Barry Weiss is because he wants to bring nonpartisanship back to the news. That's what he wants to do. Now, the irony with that is that CBS News is easily one of the most partisan news outlets on the planet. I don't think they would know conservative, it wouldn't hit them in the head. So this is going to be an interesting slog. I'm sure at first, at least, she's going to encounter enormous resistance, basically just like Trump has with the deep state, like Mandy Gunesekara was talking about. It's like these people do. It's not even just that they don't want to die. It's that they want things their way. They're so used to having things done their way. They can't. And you stop and think about this by extension. That's even what's going on, like in Portland and Chicago, with this whole thing with ICE. I mean, I was thinking about this today. You basically have a Democratic Party that's basically acting like little children. They're not getting their way, so they're going to screw things up for everybody else. That's the idea. They're going to go out. They're going to battle the ICE people. The Democrats are telling the Chicago police not to help. So they're pulling a temper tantrum. Of course, the thing is here, there's going to be enormous amount of physical damage and people might get killed, but they don't care. They don't care. We're not getting our way. We lost power. And so we're gonna throw a tantrum. That's all it is. It's a giant tantrum. It's a tantrum, unfortunately, with some very real world consequences. But that's probably what's going to happen at the CBS News too, if they go through with this. Excuse me. Sorry. My guess is they are either going to offer to buy out or force out a whole bunch of people. A very large percentage of the people working there. And along with that too, let me see. Gallup poll just came out last week that said that trust in the media in the United States among American citizens is at an all-time low. It's the lowest it's been since they started doing the polling in 1992. I think people who said they don't trust the media a lot or somewhat. I think what was it like? Hold on a second. Let me look really quick. What was the actual figure? I should have written it down. It's 28% of the public says they do not have any trust. No, 20% of the public says they have a great deal of a fair amount of trust in major media. 28%, the rest of the people don't. That's 62%, right? Did I get that right? 72%. That's what it is. Yeah, I can figure in my head. I can do it. So yeah, that just goes to show you what's going on. I don't think I have to tell you this. It's the reason uh, shows like this one are making such a big impact, basically on American culture and even business, because all right, we're not exactly tearing the world up here, but the thing is, there's hundreds of shows like this, and cumulatively, yeah, I think we're having an impact. So together. This got lost in the news. Speaking of the news media, um, this happened on this weekend. HBO has announced that HBO Max, their over-the-top streaming service, is no longer going to carry CNN. Now, right now, Warner Discovery, that owns HBO and CNN, owns both HBO and CNN. I didn't read a single article that pointed this out. So this is the reason I'm bringing this up here, because the thing you have to understand, they're owned by the same company. So it didn't. Now, normally, like for cable system to run CNN, they have to pay a carriage fee, which is the reason your cable. I think I don't know what the last I heard is that CNN was charging cable subscribers about $1.50 a month. I think it was, but you have to realize that. Well, there were up until a few years ago, there were 100 million people in the United States who had cable, and everybody had CNN because it was the legacy news thing. It was the very first one. So they were getting literally, and this is a figure I'm not really pulling out of my butt. They were literally getting $100 million a month off of carriage fees. Now you can do some quick math. That's over $1 billion a year. That's before they even sold a single commercial. They had $1 billion. Okay. Now the amount of people in America who have cable or linear cable television, that not over the top streaming and not on demand, is about 65 million people. But still, you're figuring about $65 million a month. But the thing that got lost in this whole thing that nobody brought up is that HBO Max doesn't have to pay for CNN because it's owned by the same company. And if they're paying for it, it's an internal transaction. In other words, no money actually changes in any hands out of the company. So it's a bookkeeping transaction, right? So so HBO Max drops CNN even though it's free. That's the part that got lost here that no one mentioned. And I just find this hilarious. They don't have to pay for it, but we're not going to carry it anyway. You know why? It sucks. That's why. That's why they're not carrying it. And so now in the future, starting next year, Warner Discovery is going to branch all their television stuff off into two different companies. There's the streaming is going to go in one company, and the legacy cable stuff is going to go in another company. That's because everybody recognizes the legacy cable stuff is dying. It will eventually go away. It will. CNN is on a trajectory to go out of business. And no one disputes that at this point, unless they can vastly change their business model. They are not going to survive. But I just found this hilarious. And also I found, like I said, I found it hilarious that nobody mentioned this, is that HBO doesn't have to pay for CNN, and they decided, well, we're not going to run it anyway. We're going to just take this out. So you can make some sort of judgment about what the people at Warner Discovery think of CNN. There you go. Jimmy Fallon, in the meantime, has said that he wants to keep his show away from politics, and he has, of the 4 or 5 guys who are doing this, other than Gutfeld, which is a complete other world, he's the one who's been the least affected or politically. And at first, this almost put him out of business. I mean, 2, 3 years ago, he almost got canceled because he refused to make the show more political. Everyone else had done that. Because at that point, I mean, it was a leftist mob and they were after everybody. And they're basically in the C suites of most of these companies. So he had a hard time surviving that. Now it looks like he's going to be the big winner. And I've said this before too. Uh, NBC is not going to cancel the Tonight Show just because of legacy identity. I mean, you have to understand that Tonight Show has been on television since 1955, 70 years, same age as me. I'm going to be 70 on Friday. Yeah, it's been on the television for 70 years, and it was supposed to be, and still is, kind of the nighttime equivalent of the Today Show, which they also started 2, 3 years before that. The Today Show has been on, and these shows have had the same name other than a little tweaking. I mean, Tonight started out as Tonight with Steve Allen, and then once Carson got a hold of it, it was the Tonight Show starring Johnny Carson, and then with Jay Leno, it was the Tonight Show with Jay Leno. Now I think it's the Tonight Show starring Jimmy Fallon. One thing, but for all practical purposes, it's had the same title. So it's a part of their corporate identity. They're not going to let it go. And the other thing that gets lost in all this at the top of the show is talking about some of the changes we made in social media. And that is, of the 5 guys who are doing this, Fallon has by far the biggest footprint on social media. It's not even close. I mean, he's online, he's ripping it up. And although I don't know how much they can monetize this at this point, at least I think everyone thinks that's the future. So no, Jimmy Fallon's not going to get canceled. The rest of these guys, I don't know if they'll get canceled. I mean, Colbert already has been. It looks like my guess is that Jimmy Kimmel they will probably not renew his contract, which I think comes up in May, if I'm right. I thought he would be off the air for good when they took him off for this Charlie Kirk thing. I really did. I thought they would look at this as an excuse or reason to basically fire him. But it turns out what I didn't count on is the fact that one of his wife's best friends is the president of ABC Television, and Bob Iger, the guy who runs the Walt Disney Company, which is the parent company of ABC, is also really good friends with them, and it looks like that basically saved his ass. Not only that, there's the perception that there's an increasing perception that the corporate brass at Disney ABC actually want him to do this stuff. The thing about bashing Trump, that they've, now I don't, as a business, I don't know, as a business proposition or as a transaction, I don't see why you would do that, but weirder things have happened. I mean, Colbert got canned, and not because per se he was so overly liberal and lost half the public. He got canned because they were losing $40 million a year. And Kimmel's probably losing at least that much. Kimmel has a bigger staff than Colbert, and his ratings are only about half as much. So he's probably losing more money. So I did read somebody did an analysis and said that no, in the long run, when you consider all the revenue sources, that the Live with Jimmy Kimmel actually makes money, and maybe that's true. I don't know, but still, I think they will when his contract's up. I don't think it'll be renewed. All of these shows are going to go away, and the one thing is too, you have to think about this also. The format for quote unquote late night television hasn't changed much since Steve Allen started in 1955. It's been tweaked. All the shows that have done really well since then have broken out of the format. I mean, there's Gutfeld, who's basically killing it in the ratings, and he's on pay television. You got to pay to see it, and yet his ratings are like, I mean, he's wiping the floor with these people, and there's that, and also this gets lost to history. But Chelsea Lately, that ran from I think around 2006 to 2014, also was a different type of program, and it did really well in the ratings too. Just because I think it's refreshing. People are tired of seeing stars, narcissistic people sitting down on the couch and talking about their latest project. Nobody gives a crap anymore. It might have been relatively unique 30 years ago, but now no one cares. So I remember reading when Fallon took over the Tonight Show, him and his producers basically sat down for a few weeks and they watched apparently hundreds of episodes of Carson. And they came to the conclusion, and being I'm a huge Carson fan, as everyone who pretty much does this is, because you kind of have to be, uh, that they came to the conclusion a lot of these shows were actually pretty boring. And I watched a lot of them, and I hate to say it, they're right. Carson did a fantastic job, I would say, under the circumstances, but the circumstances weren't that great. I mean, and people forget about this. When he started the show, it wasn't just 90 minutes. It was 90 minutes plus 15 more. It was an hour and 5 minutes when he started. It was an hour 45 minutes when he started. And for somebody who does this, I can tell you, it's like, especially in front of a live audience and a live show. I mean, they did it. I don't know how long they did a live, but they did a live for a while because there basically was no videotape, that didn't start till like the early 1960s. So it was quite a slog, to try to be interesting for 90 minutes. And then in 1982, he negotiated his contract, and it was a deal breaker. He was very insistent on this. No, we're going to cut the show to an hour. He said, we either cut the show to an hour or I quit. And they agreed, and that changed basically that was the big change in the format since Steve Allen started it. So at any rate, I agree with this article here. Jimmy Fallon isn't going anywhere. He isn't. He will be the last one standing, and basically he will be proven to have been correct about staying out of politics. So the last thing I got here before we go on to Jonathan Lockwood, and maybe because I'm a geek and this interests me, on September 27th, 1825, 200 years ago last week, was basically the start of commercial rail service on the planet. And this is highly qualified, but the thing is, there is a line in the sand here. It wasn't the first rail system, and it wasn't the first time rail delivered anything, but it was the line. Hold on, I pulled this up here. It was the line from Shildon to Stockton in northeast England. That trip on September 27th, 1825, basically for all practical purposes, started commercial rail service on the planet. There were a couple of things here. It was the first rail system that actually ran on what was now the standard gauge railroad. There were all sorts of arguments about how wide the rails should be, and that line started what was the standard gauge. But the real important thing is, it's the first time in the history that tickets were sold to passengers. It was the first railroad that had paying passengers, first trip that had paying passengers on it. And that started that's basically the start of the Industrial Revolution. It was 200 years ago last week. So look what we did in 200 years, huh? You stop and think about it. I still find the electricity thing amazing. I mean, we've only had electricity for 150 years. So, and you're talking about the extraterrestrials flying around, even those that are only 200 years ahead of us, even the people just figured out how to break the light barrier. That's eons when you think about the fact that we went from no electricity to your iPhone in 150 years. Yeah. I don't know. Humans are crazy. We're crazy people, man. We're crazy. So, now here's Jonathan Lockwood in 12 seconds. Joining us from his home in Northern Virginia, former Army Colonel. What can I talk? Jonathan, what the fuck's wrong with me? Former Army Colonel and author Jonathan Lockwood. Hi.
Yeah, great to be here. Having a wonderful week, and we on Sasha and Ivan and I on our show, we are excited. We are really excited about the fact that President Trump is actually agreeing with us.
Yeah.
He's making the same observations in Truth Social and in public statements about the Ukraine war and the factors affecting it that we have been making on our show almost to the exclusion of everyone else for the past couple of years.
So, Jonathan,
we are the only ones that have been arguing. Yeah, go ahead.
I want to set up the fact that, okay, so the three of you guys from the Ukraine show were on this show about maybe a month ago, roughly. I can't really remember. And
September 8th, I think.
During the course of that conversation, which is about an hour, you guys convinced me that, your stance about the fact that Ukraine basically had no alternative but to win, because I thought this was always going to be a negotiated procedure, because I just assumed that at some point, it was inevitable that Ukraine was going to lose. And you convinced me that that wasn't true. And apparently, like you said, Trump has now concluded the same thing. And it was, but it all hinges.
I think somebody may have been sneaking in our podcasts.
Well, here's the deal.
Those guys make sense.
That's what I want to ask you. It seems like it hinges on the fact that he's come to the. I'll just cut to the colloquial chase here. He's come to the conclusion that Putin is now nuts. That it's impossible to negotiate with him. Do you think that's true? Do you think that's what changed his mind?
He's probably concluded that. Plus, he also, one of my fellow podcasters, Sasha, observed that President Trump loves to back a winner. He doesn't want to be seen as backing a loser.
Well, yeah.
And now he's become convinced that the Ukrainians are really winners. They can win this thing. They can drive the Russians out of Ukraine. And
like you guys pointed out on the previous show, you guys pointed out the fact that, this is it goes without saying at this point, this war that was supposed to be over in 2 weeks has gone on for 3 years, and at the very least, Ukraine is holding its own.
Yes,
that's
and they are mounting counteroffensives and they're retaking territory.
Yeah,
slowly but surely they're retaking. And Russia, they're becoming exhausted. Their manpower resources. The Ukrainians have been successfully attacking deep and destroying just damaging oil refineries. The Russians are suffering gasoline shortages all over the place in their country, and they are now the Ukrainians are attacking Moscow with drones, but they also are acquiring the missiles with which to strike Moscow. And their new Flamingo missiles, they are producing them right now at a rate of about 2 to 3 a month, but that rate they project is going up shortly to 7 a month. With those missiles, they can strike Moscow effectively and get through their air defenses. And that is going to increase the pressure on the Russian military and political leadership to say, we can't win this. At that point, by the way, that is the moment of highest danger, because that puts the Russian leadership in a mental state of desperation.
Right, that's right.
Recall that during World War II, mid-1941, the United States had cut off oil and steel exports to Japan. And at that point, that threatened the entire Japanese offensive. Mm-hmm. And at that point, the Japanese leadership had two choices: either effectively surrender by stopping and negotiate peace and stop their planned offensive, or take their chances and attack Pearl Harbor in an effort to knock out the United States' ability to strike back. And even though the U.S. Navy had said, the Japanese could attack Pearl Harbor successfully, but that would be strategic suicide for them, because we just mobilize and kick their butts.
Right.
But they failed to reckon with the Japanese state of mind, the Japanese mindset. To the Japanese, especially at that time, surrender was unthinkable.
Right. They couldn't.
Death was preferred to surrender.
Right.
So they went ahead and took their chances.
Well, the proof of that is that we dropped an atomic bomb on them, and we were
get them to surrender.
We were assuming they would surrender. They said, no. What else you got?
Here's another one. Boom. Dropped a second.
And you and I have talked about this before. The amazing thing about that is we had no more. We had 2 of them.
We had 2. And we kept our mouth shut. It says,
but they didn't know that. Right.
They didn't know that, but they said, it would have taken us a long while to get that 3rd one ready to drop.
I heard
it.
6 weeks. It would have taken 6 weeks to come up with another bomb. Right.
Right. Yeah. And and the target for that one would have been Tokyo.
Uh-huh.
We'd have dropped it on Tokyo. So we are really, really serious.
Right. It was kind of like the John Cleese character the Holy Grail movie. It's like, they cut off his arms and legs, and it's just a flesh wound. Yeah, yeah. No, but you're right. They simply could not conceive of losing. They couldn't.
Right. And now here's how this applies to the current situation with Russia. Remember that, during the Cold War, I was looking at various Soviet journals and sources during my dissertation research, and I would frequently come up with see their discussions of what they call the crisis of capitalism. And their view was that as the Soviet Union continued to gain success, the socialist revolution continued to gain successes in the world, eventually the capitalists would become so desperate that they would lash out with a nuclear strike in order to reverse the situation.
Uh-huh.
So then the Soviet leadership was contending, therefore, because of this possibility, the Soviet Union must have strive for the capability to fight, survive, and win a nuclear war with the United States. That doesn't mean that they actually ever had it. They didn't. But
Right.
that was the only politically feasible goal that they could have.
Yeah,
based
no,
on
hold
what
on. I
they
gotta stop
pursued.
you. I gotta ask a question. All right, you're
Sure.
talking about the crisis. What they perceived as the crisis of capitalism. Now,
Right.
it's 19. Well, okay. The revolution was in 1917. It's like the 20s. Is it because they didn't know enough about capitalism, about the fact that it's the only system that creates money? It's like,
They underestimated, they greatly underestimated the resilience of capitalism, particularly American capitalism, because they just simply could not believe their eyes that the United States could do this and be sustainable. And they overestimated their own ability to endure and compete with capitalism. Now, here's another interesting thing. The Russians are, again, one of the things that they talked about, I looked in their military analyses and said, only the threat of a massive retaliatory blow will stop the imperialists. Now, keep in mind, remember what I talked about mirror imaging? They are projecting their own attitudes. Only the threat of a massive retaliatory blow will stop the imperialists. Basically, they are projecting what would stop us. Only the threat of a massive retaliatory blow.
Right.
So, here's how it applies in the current situation. If the Russians become desperate enough, because remember, they have been brandishing their nuclear arsenal all during this conflict, trying to play on the fears of Western leaders about the fear of nuclear escalation. The antidote to that is not you don't try to appease them. You don't say, oh, please don't do that. What you do is you tell them, if you launch one nuclear weapon in Ukraine, we will strike back with our combined nuclear forces and destroy you utterly. Yeah, that is the threat of a massive retaliatory blow. The threat, you don't actually have to carry it out. You have to be credible. They must believe you when they say, we will launch a massive retaliatory nuclear blow. And who is the only leader currently in the Western world who's credible enough to pull off a threat like that? Donald Trump.
Do you think there's any chance that we would actually do it? I mean, if they use one nuclear bomb in Ukraine, do you think we would end up retaliating with one nuclear bomb somewhere?
That's the key. You must make that, in order to prevent that, even the use of one nuclear weapon, you have to make it absolutely clear to Russia at that point. It says, you do that, all bets are off.
Yeah.
Hey, John, all bets are off.
I just thought of this. Do we have any, like, for lack of a better term, small nuclear bombs?
We do. We do. We have had developed weapons for a weapon system called the Davy Crockett. The Davy Crockett was a very short-range nuclear weapon system that could launch maybe at about, it was practically a Jeep-mounted nuclear weapons delivery system in the 1950s. It was deployed in the early 60s. And it's basically a mini nuke, like maybe about 1 to 2 kilotons, maybe less. And you're designed to be deployed on the battlefield and used. And I used to joke in my classes when I talked about the Davy Crockett. I said that this weapon system was usually assigned to the least popular soldiers in the entire battalion. It's like, It's the equivalent of dropping a hand grenade in front
Oh,
of
yeah.
yourself.
Now I know. Yes, I know we have tactical battlefield nuclear weapons. I knew that,
We
but I don't.
do.
I'm not even concerned. I'm not even kind of including them as what I would consider nuclear weapons. I don't know what the classification is, but but yeah, I mean, we basically have nuclear.
We have them. We have most of those tactical nuclear weapons of old style. They are in storage. They would have to be pulled out of the stockpile, pulled out of mothballs, so to speak, and made useful. But right now, it's just tactical nuclear weapons are really kind of a to what to us is tactical, to the Europeans is strategic, because it's occurring on their territory.
Yeah, now you have to define the difference between those terms, because I always get them confused. Yeah. I think everyone else gets them
strategic. Strategic to us, strategic nuclear weapons are designed to strike the enemy's homeland. They are long range. They are much more powerful than tactical nuclear weapons. Tactical nuclear weapons are much shorter range. They are designed for the defense of NATO or for use on a battlefield outside of the United States. The United States does not defend its own territory with tactical nuclear weapons. For one thing, it's next to impossible for any other country in the world to be able to invade the United States.
Oh yeah,
because we have not only the two oceans protecting us, but we have the U.S. Navy, which dominates the world's oceans.
Right.
It's more powerful than all the rest of the navies combined.
Right.
So it's suicide to think of invading the United States unless you're talking about illegal immigration. Just sort of trickling in from the borders. That's about as close to an invading in the United States as you're going to get.
Well, I'm sitting here in Minneapolis, smack in the middle of the North American continent, and I'm not too afraid. This is the last place anybody's going to come. So,
if you're in Texas, however. If you're in Texas, it's a very real threat.
Yeah. No, if you're on the coast, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. If you're anywhere on the coast, it's a genuine threat. So right now, that is something that President Trump is dealing with very effectively. He's shut illegal immigration essentially down to zero. And now he's in the process methodically, not indiscriminately. He's methodically first deport the criminals, the ones that are obviously criminals.
Yeah.
And then he's also putting the squeeze by allowing the federal government to be shut down. He is also putting an economic squeeze by preventing aid to illegal immigrations. The Democrats want to provide free health care for illegal immigrants, and the Republicans are saying, no, we'll go ahead and shut down the government. Because then the president will have the authority to not only fire several 100,000 federal employees that he deems non-essential, but also because all of these illegal immigrants will not have funds for health care, they may take that incentive to leave voluntarily.
Yeah.
All of these, it's a multifaceted strategy when you really look at it.
Well, it is. And the thing is, let me ask you this too, because I never thought about this. And one of the things I'm good at is formulating questions. You and I never talk about domestic stuff that often, because that's not why you come on the show. But how does the government shutdown affect, like, for example, militarily the war in Ukraine? Is there anything in the Army that's considered non-essential? I don't even know.
No. The military spending continues because it's not affected by a government shutdown, because that's already funded. Those portions, shut down really means shut down on discretionary budget. All the things that are automatically scheduled, like Social Security, pensions, government pensions, those continue, and military spending. So those are already taken care of. What the government shutdown is likely to do that's positive from the Republican perspective and from President Trump's perspective is simply to provide an incentive. The Democrats have essentially handed President Trump the authority to fire all non-essential personnel.
Right.
And the Democrats can't do anything about it. They can try to seek revenge in the midterms, but guess what? The American people aren't. The Republicans are calculating that once President Trump's economic incentives, the deregulation, the tax cuts, all these various forms of economic incentive, the deals that President Trump says he's made with foreign nations to invest in the United States, he is basically assuming that all of these things are going to come together in the beginning of 2026, and you will see an economic stimulus that results in a boom. Yeah, I'm talking. When I say boom, I'm talking about 5% annual GDP growth.
Yeah,
that's a boom.
Right.
That happened, by the way, back in 1982 through 84. President Reagan, he instituted very high interest rates to squeeze. Volcker and Reagan were trying to squeeze inflation out of the system through inflation, and then he hoped that the tax cuts and other things would then kick in, and the U.S. economy would recover. By 1984, in the presidential election race, the U.S. economy, the GDP, was growing at a rate of about 4 to 5%. It was booming.
Yeah.
And I was looking. Essentially, the Democrats were toast. There was nothing that Mondale could have done.
Yeah, the really amazing thing about this, I have economists on the show regularly, Jonathan, about the fact that, like, my friend Murray Sabrin has explained to me that it isn't entirely this, but what happened with Carter is that Carter figured about 3 years into his term, he suddenly came to the realization, and part of the reason was the sudden success of deregulating the airlines. People forget this. Before 1978, all ticket prices were exactly the same because they were literally set by the federal government. But when he deregulated the airlines and realized how successful, how quickly it boomed, and then he, a Democrat, and the thing is, and Murray, my friend, is a staunch Republican, so he's not overly crediting Carter here, but he said Carter did realize that, holy crap, maybe we should deregulate everything, and going under the assumption that he was going to be reelected, they started doing that, and this is like
all Reagan had to do was step on the accelerator.
That's right, exactly right. It was already in play. Guess
what Carter also did? Remember, when the Soviets invaded Afghanistan in December 1979, Carter saw the light. He recognized how evil the Soviet Union really was. And being a good Christian man, he decided he did not turn the other cheek. He decided to retaliate with grain embargo on Moscow, boycotting the Moscow Olympics. And one more thing, he initiated the major defense buildup, the major increase in U.S. defense spending. So that I remember that very well, because when I came on active duty as a first lieutenant in September 1980, incidentally the same year that Mr. Hegseth was born. Think about that one for a while.
You had to bring that up, huh?
Oh, I did. Yeah. That's the year Mr. Hegseth and I could not have had a meaningful strategic discussion about U.S.-Soviet affairs back then.
Well,
hey, Pete, he was 3 months old.
Right.
He was 3 months old when I came on. And I was like, hey, Pete, what do you think about U.S.-Soviet relations? Wah, wah. He was working on the skill sets that every human being works on in their first year of life.
Let me ask you really quickly, do you think he's doing a good job?
Well, the jury right now, he is emphasizing physical fitness and so forth, which is not bad. He's trying to reinstill a warrior ethos.
Yeah.
The only thing that he needs to add to that, we have to be strong, we have to be fit, but we also have to be smart. We have to be smarter than our opponents. Our leadership has to study military history and strategy, greater emphasis on that, greater use of war games to analyze potential conflicts, as well as those that have occurred in the past.
So,
I'm a
does it just go beyond without saying, or is that just arrogance that we're just assuming that's in there?
Based upon what I've seen and read about, we have not been emphasizing the study of military history and strategy nearly enough.
All right.
We need to do that more. And so Mr. Hegseth, it's doing okay, but he can do better. And once he's emphasized physical fitness, then go ahead and say, oh, by the way, you all need to study and learn from history and war games and make use of them so that we do not repeat the mistakes of history. And we are doing a pretty good job so far because we're learning from the Ukrainians and their use of drones. Yeah. We've got this major agreement. We are incorporating drones into our force structure and strategy, which is a very good thing. There are other improvements that can be made, which I can discuss in another forum somewhere else or another time. But right now, it's just amazing the way that things are going. It's a very Go
Tell
ahead.
me if I'm wrong here. My impression is, I mean, we obviously know how to implement drones, but what I've gathered from you guys and others is that the Ukrainians are really, really good at actually using them. It's not so much
Yes,
like
they are.
designing them or anything like that. They are good at strategically placing them.
They're good at doctrine and how to actually effectively use them in both offense and defense, and in finding various innovative ways to use drones. And that's what we are learning from the Ukrainians. And
Right.
the Ukrainians could very well develop a very good relationship with the United States by having their military leaders and drone experts come over and teach us how to do this, so that
Yeah.
we get the benefit of all those lessons without having to make mistakes ourselves. So this is a very good development. The war in Ukraine, as sad as it seems in some respects, it does have some positive aspects in that the Ukrainians are in effect preparing us to be more effective in the future, any future wars in the 21st century.
So, Jonathan, we touched on this when you guys, the three of you, were on here, but what we were talking on the previous show about the basically the woefulness of the ground game of Russia, and you were talking about history going back to even the Second World War. So, and apparently that's continuing. They are woefully effective on the ground. Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Okay, my question though is, do you know internally why that happens in the Russian army? I mean, do you hear
Corruption.
Corruption.
There's been evidence that the Ukrainians have shown us on various videos of the degree of corruption in the Russian military system, where they basically would pirate various military hardware, whatever, for their own personal use or various other things, or for profit, or selling it. And yet there's an old joke during that where one Russian soldier is saying to another, says, Russia, we must be the richest country on earth. And the other soldier says, why do you say that? He says, well, apparently for 60 years we've been stealing from the state, and yet there's still something left to steal.
Yeah, okay. That's good.
Yeah, but as Margaret Thatcher said, the problem with socialism is that eventually you run out of other people's money.
But the thing is, that's not a slogan. That's actually true.
That's truth.
That's the problem. Getting back to what you're talking about their reaction to capitalism. Now, I used to think. I don't know if you're aware of this, like domestic history, but when the Great Depression started in '29, Herbert Hoover was president. And he basically encouraged the public to basically, like, quote unquote, do better. It was all nebulous. He didn't really want to do anything about it, and so he lost the election, and in comes Franklin Roosevelt. And so
Roosevelt.
No, go ahead.
Roosevelt, according to some observers, actually saved capitalism without necessarily intending to, because the government intervention that they took worked enough to prevent total collapse of the economic system, but it could not generate recovery.
Well, right, exactly. That's exactly what Sabrin's point is. His point is that basically, if they had done what they should have done, the recession would have been done in 2 years, but it basically dragged out for 8 because Roosevelt.
You actually had you had a double dip recession. You had one recession of 1933.
That's right.
You had a mini recovery going from 33 to 37.
Right.
And then it crashed again.
And
you had a double dip recession.
Right. People thought it was over, and it wasn't. Right. That's right.
Yep.
Yeah,
and the only thing that pulled us out of it was World War II.
Yeah. Right. Sabrin's point is that, or his idea is that Roosevelt was basically the captive of his own ideology, which was highly progressive, and it didn't work with economics. And I always thought, well, I told Murray, I said, well, isn't that just because 100 years ago they didn't know that much about how capitalism worked? It was basically a great experiment. He said, no. He said they knew exactly what to do. It's just that Roosevelt didn't want to do it.
Yep, that's true. And so now you have a situation where you have the the Republican Party, which pretty much embraces capitalism still, and various other aspects of measured constitutional democracy. And the leadership, not all of the Democrats embrace the leftist orientation of its current leadership, but it's why that you have a lot of people in the Democratic Party leaving to either become independents or actually join the Republican Party.
Right, that's right.
And what's going to happen is you're going to see in the midterms, the Democrats are going to make the same mistake that they did in 1984. They're going to move further to the left, and then when the elections come up in the midterms, the Republicans will gain an even larger majority in the Senate and an even larger majority in the House. And at that point, for the final 2 years of Trump's term, he's going to step on that accelerator like you wouldn't believe.
A lot can happen in a year.
A lot can happen in a year, but
yes, my betting odds are on exactly what you said. I think the Republicans will actually increase their leads in the House and the Senate. That's what I think is going to happen. So we'll see. It'll be really interesting. I think, and maybe you and I have talked about this before. I can't remember. And I've had to explain to my liberal friends how Trump actually did take a risk here with this whole tariff situation, because it's not guaranteed to work. But that said, if I had to put my money on it, I think it's going to. I mean, it looks like it's going to, but we probably won't find out for certain until about Memorial Day.
About the beginning of next year, in the spring of next year.
Right.
And it's not tariffs. The tariffs are not the only thing that he's doing.
That's right. That's
a combination of actions.
Correct.
It's the combination that's going to work, not any one thing.
That's right. You're right. In and of itself, the tariffs are only a small part of it. I totally agree. So it's going to be really interesting.
So it's really going to be fascinating to watch. And if it comes off the way that President Trump and his advisors are hoping and thinking that it will, that we will be seeing an economic boom similar to the mid 80s starting to take place right around the spring of next year. I'd say might be about right. And as you roll into the fall and you see those midterm elections coming up, there's going to be panic in one party and near euphoria in the other party, which would be the Republican Party.
Yeah.
So,
Jonathan,
right now
in the short term now, what do you see happening in Ukraine? What do you think is right?
In the short term, what is happening is the Ukrainians are continuing, again, their use of drones and missiles that continue to strike deep into Russia to weaken their logistical and economic infrastructure, in particular oil and gasoline, to create bigger shortages. As they gain the long-range missiles with which to strike Moscow, they will do that.
They have not struck Moscow yet, correct?
Oh, yes. No. Well, yes, they have, but with drones.
Okay.
When they get missiles, and they've been given permission to use ATACMS and other things to strike deep. So it just depends on what the Ukrainians are able to come up with and develop their capabilities and build up and continue to strike and weaken the Russian ability to wage offensive warfare. That's the key. And they're rapidly approaching the point, especially in Crimea, where the air defenses have been weakened and various targets have been struck in occupied Crimea. I predict that at some point here, quite likely before the end of this year, the Ukrainians could unleash a counteroffensive that not only seals off Crimea, but deprives the Russian occupiers of logistics and reinforcement. Then the Ukrainians can take their strategic reserves, which I am pretty certain they have formed up already for this purpose, launch an offensive which will retake the Crimea, take it back, and force the Russian occupiers there to surrender. At that point, that will be an unmistakable operational defeat for Russia, one that they cannot explain, explain away, or we meant to do that. No, you didn't.
No, it'll be humiliating if they can do it.
Yes, exactly. And therein comes that element of desperation. Yeah. Okay. At this point, unless we have to make certain that the Russians understand if they suffer a severe operational defeat conventionally, don't even think about trying to launch a nuclear weapon in Ukraine, because otherwise, the NATO allies, along with the United States, we are capable and are willing to to launch a massive retaliatory blow. And to the Russians, that would be credible. As a matter of fact, as Winston Churchill once said, the thing that the Russians respect more than anything else is strength. And there is nothing for which they have more contempt than weakness, particularly military weakness. By the way, you want to hear a good Star Trek analogy that applies to this?
Of course I do.
Oh, yeah, this is a good one. In the classic Star Trek series with Captain Kirk and McCoy and Spock, there was this episode entitled, you may have seen it, Balance of Terror. This is when the Federation first encountered the Romulans in the neutral zone. And this one Romulan warbird had been destroying asteroid outposts along the border of the neutral zone. And they were engaging them. And the leadership of the Enterprise was discussing, what do we do about this? And this one crewman said, he asked Mr. Spock, you've never mentioned why. Basically, what Mr. Spock recommended was, I agree, attack. And Kirk said, explain. He says, well, if the Romulans are in fact similar to my Vulcan race, then weakness is something we dare not show. So, to borrow from that show, if you equate the Russians as sort of modern day or sort of like the Romulans, weakness is something you dare not show.
And let's end it with that. That's great.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. I can't, I love talking to you. I love you. Thank you for coming on. It's like it's always illuminating.
And we're going to have more opportunities too, especially with the Hamas talks. Yeah,
well, we never got to didn't even get Israel.
But that's okay, because we can reserve that for another time as we see how this plays out with the peace talks. But I can give you one observation of this right now, that a peace talk settlement, it cannot lead, if you're going to have lasting peace in the Middle East between Israel and its Arab neighbors, what you do not want to create a separate Palestinian state. No. You do not want to create a state that has, at least theoretically, the goal of eliminating Israel. Because still have.
Hold it. We have to spend a couple minutes on this, because I have not read the entirety of the 20-point plan, but my impression is that it would create a Palestinian state, but Hamas has to leave. They can't have anything to do with it. Is that acceptable? What you can tell?
That is creating a Palestinian state, assuming that they could convince Hamas to stay out of it.
Right.
Yeah, that I have my doubt. I have my severe doubts.
I agree. That's the big question.
Because if they cannot, if Hamas might try to covertly influence that new Palestinian state or take it over or whatever.
Right.
Because if you have a separate Palestinian state, that is something which is I consider problematic, because you cannot have a state that has, by its very existence, trying to advocate the elimination of Israel. From when you hear that anthem of theirs, "From the River to the Sea,"
right?
They're singing about essentially disseminating about the eventual elimination of all Jews. And what kind of agreement is that? So this is going to be a very knotty problem. The only solution that I see is continued Israeli military dominance, and essentially the denial of statehood, to even assuming that the Palestinians would want to be a state. What means would they have for sustaining a state? How are they going to sustain themselves?
That's the problem. They've been left alone for 14 years, and they have no infrastructure at all. The only thing they care about is killing Jews.
Right, and that's not a basis for a state.
No, it isn't. That's correct.
I'm sorry, that's a basis. That's a reason for the Israeli leadership to do what Rome did with Carthage during the Punic Wars. Remember, this one Roman senator would end each one of his speeches with "Carthago delenda est," Carthage must be destroyed.
Uh-huh.
And the Romans did that, and
Yeah.
they effectively eliminated it as a state. So now you have an analogy here in the present, where the Palestinians would be saying in Latin, if they were speaking Latin, they would be saying Israel deslenda est, Israel must be destroyed.
Right.
And you cannot have, the only way that can end is with the total elimination of one state or the other.
Yeah.
And the Israelis are determined that it's not going to be them.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. All right, Jonathan. Thank you. I really appreciate your time. We'll talk to you. We'll talk to you soon. Okay.
Okay. Great.
Take care. That's Jonathan Lockwood, former U.S. Army Colonel. They use one of his books, from what I understand, as a textbook at West Point. Really bright guy. And I played the wrong pumper. What the hell? So this has been a really long show. Those of you who sat through the whole thing, I want to thank you. And several things going on here. We played Mandy Gunesekara's interview again because it didn't get transmitted the first time. Jonathan came back on. This was a new interview. We taped this a few hours ago, but still, he's there, and then I'm prattling on my Gymcast, and all of a sudden it's almost 2 hours. Now, technically, we can go over 2 hours, but it really screws up some of our distributors, so we don't do that. So anyway, thank you if you made it all the way through. I want to thank you, but we had a lot to cover because we're on vacation. Tomorrow night, Nils Gravelius, Los Angeles-based private investigator, joins us again. Second appearance on the show. We're going to talk about crime. That's what we're going to talk about. He knows a lot about it. Really interesting guy. Seriously, check this out. He's really cool. Wednesday. Oh, geez, I got to look. What am I doing? Who knows? Wednesday, Jennifer Oliver O'Connell from Red State. She's joining us. And Thursday, it's my 70th birthday. Tim Conaway will be here. We'll be taking your phone calls all night long at 325-CALL-JIM. Anyway, thank you for watching tonight. Really appreciate it. Good night, Uncle Donnie, wherever you are. And good night to you, wherever you may be. We'll see you tomorrow night, everybody. Take care.